Hi everybody, I'm Laura Harris-Smith and welcome to The Three. I have an exciting guest with me today. He really doesn't need any introduction, but if you do not know who Dr. Jordan Rubin is, you're going to want to tune in today. If you have any health issues that you're needing to unravel, I'm telling you, this guy from personal experience has not only survived, but learned to thrive and made really a crusade out of what seemed like a curse. And I'm really thankful for the ministry that he has. And I want you, whether it's you who has these health issues or someone else that you know, you need to tune in today. You need to tell others to tune in, because we're going to put tools in your hands today to help you get stronger, body, mind, and spirit. Well, as I said, his name is Dr. Jordan Rubin. He's a naturopath. He's a New York Times best-selling author, TV personality, author of 27 books. I just found out we're only going to cover a fraction of them today. But Jordan, welcome to The Three.
It's so great to be here.
So you were almost, like for 10 minutes, we almost had the idea that you were going to be with us in, I think it was season 2, you and Dr. Axe, and you were both speaking at a conference at the same time, and it didn't work out with our filming schedule. And then I found out, and this is just one of the books we're going to be talking about today, Essential Oils, Ancient Medicine. I homeschooled my kids with Ty and Charlene Bollinger.
Oh, very
so
cool.
we had him on, and that was a phenomenal show,
sure.
Just the basics of this. I'm diving right in, because this is my wheelhouse, essential oils. Tell me, I wanted to start with your story, but just first tell me, how did you make the leap into essential oils? Because to me, and I hope in a couple of generations from now, it won't be this way, but everybody has that moment when they're like, oh, I'm going to try essential oils. What was that for you?
Well, before I answer that, I need to tell you from now on, I'm going to use the curse to crusade. And you'll know when you hear me say it that it started here. I talk about tragedy to triumph,
yes.
mess to messenger,
yes,
but
right.
Curse to crusade, that's gold.
Well,
so we're going to use
I've lived it, so that's how
I resonate with that very well. I'm trying to think back. I was exposed to essential oils a very long time ago. I'm sort of a third generation natural health person.
Yeah.
So yeah, my dad was in the first class of naturopathy, sort of the back half of last century. People are like, what is that back half
exactly.
of? And I was delivered by naturopathic students in Portland, Oregon at National College of Naturopathic Medicine.
Amazing.
So I know I would have been exposed to oils then, but for me, it was during the writing of The Maker's Diet, which was a book I wrote in 2003. You can't really write about biblical medicine without herbs and spices, and then you get into resins and essential oils. And so it was at that point where we started tinkering with essential oil blends and really fell in love with the way to extract the essence of plants through distillation. So people talk about essential oils and now they're a thing. Back then they were less of a thing.
Oh yeah.
But really, this is a great way to extract the lipophilic properties of plants.
And aromatic plants and oils are mentioned over 600 times in Scripture. So this is something that you can't get away at. I had always wondered how you made that leap, but I forgot that your dad was actually a naturopath, correct? And now you were delivered by, so you really were in this. And in fact, it wasn't such a uncommon thing in the early 20th century. I'm talking about like in the early 1900s.
Correct.
It was after the AMA, doctors, everything got involved and started regulating everything, that naturopathic hospitals were shut down.
Sanatoriums and all of that.
And sanatoriums with the Kellogg brothers and all of that. So,
the Dark Ages were sort of in the middle of the 19th or the 20th century, but in 1973, my dad was actually going to be on a sort of medical track. He was graduating NYU, was going to do a postgraduate study in Israel, and he and my mom were hippies, Jewish hippies. To make it even more interesting. And he read an issue of Prevention magazine, and they had an advertisement for naturopathic medicine, and there was a school that was starting in Wichita, Kansas, at Kansas Newman College for girls or boys, whatever it was, but they called it the National College of Naturopathic Medicine. So my dad went from New York City to Wichita, Kansas, and practically disowned by his family, to become a naturopath, which was otherwise code word for quack. And then a year later, the school moved to Oregon. I was born in '75, and my mom, we kind of joke, I was delivered by 4 naturopathic students is part of their
The
OBGYN sort of obstetrics
me?
curriculum, the practicum, and my mom gave them a D-, and here I was. So yeah,
that's
it was
a whole
an
other
interesting
show.
journey.
Oh,
So I was
goodness.
born with a silver sprout in my mouth, I like to say. So the industry was really different in the 70s.
Is that college still there?
It is, absolutely. It's one of 4 major naturopathic universities in the U.S., and John Bastyr, who started the largest, was one of my dad's classmates, and so yeah, it was pretty neat lineage. And I grew up as a kid of hippie health nut parents, where eating, well, we called it natural food at the time.
Yeah.
There was no organic at the time, but eating natural foods was terrifying as a young person, because I like to say that when it was Christmas, even though I'm Jewish, my parents got saved when I was 2. They came out of sort of transcendental meditation, hippie Woodstock to come to know the Lord. So I'm a Messianic Jew, which is very interesting and confusing for a young person. Messianic Jew who eats natural foods.
Oh my!
So on Christmas, I'd get these carob Santa Clauses, which made you glad Christmas was only 1 year a day. Or 1 day a year.
One day a year.
So anyway, I'm going to fast forward, but I grew up in a health conscious home, but I didn't own it or internalize it. So when I left the home, I would eat whatever junk food I could.
And that was when you went to college.
Even before that, when I went to college, the challenge there was in the early 90s, we were very misled to believe that fat was bad.
Yes, we were.
I call myself a college athlete. I was actually a cheerleader, male cheerleader. I have some interesting stories about that as well, but I cheered for Florida State. We won the national title. Closest I would get to D1 athlete. But I really believed that a low-fat and almost fat-free diet was the answer. So I would literally count my carbs. The higher the better, and the lower the fat. I remember a day where I consumed less than 10 grams of fat and 800 grams of carbs, and I was happy about it. So I just totally bought into the lie.
So and you and many others did. I did too back then. When we come back in the break, I want to talk about that. I have known so many people who they get away from home, these amazing parents who did incredible things nutritionally for you and help guiding you, but then they veer away from it, and you wound up in a really bad situation.
Yes,
so when we come back from the break, we're going to tell his story, and you're going to see really what led to the writing of The Maker's Diet. Be right back. Hi everybody, I'm Laura. You're watching The 3. We're here today with naturopathic Dr. Jordan Rubin. Now, before the break, we talked about your 27 books. We're going to do a 2-part series here. He's agreed to stay for a second show. There's no way we could cover all of them, but I want to cut right to the one that really introduced me to you. And I want you to take a look at the picture on your screen. This is Jordan before and after. He got down to 80 pounds. His digestive tract was a mess, Crohn's disease. I'm going to let you go into the whole myriad of issues, but he tried 70 different alternative treatments, and it led you, Jordan, on a journey really that you're now helping other people get healthy. You've been doing this for decades, but take us into the mind of 19-year-old Jordan Rubin and what you were going through. What was your suffering like? What were the symptoms? Somebody else is watching that's going to really relate to this.
It is interesting because I have children that are older than I was at 19, and it dawned on me recently. We have 5 adopted children and 1 biological, and my biological son is 17, going to turn 18, and I had this thought about looking at him and realizing that when I was that age, I didn't know what was about to happen to me. But what I do remember, praise God, is that I was on fire. I was not the typical 17-year-old. I went to a secular college, Florida State University, but I immediately found an amazing church and ministry to be a part of. And I can say that as a 17-year-old, I woke up every morning asking the Lord to put me in someone's path where I could share about him. So sometimes it was as silly as wearing a Christian t-shirt in the student copy center. People are like, what's a copy center? Where you made photocopies of, what's a photocopy? I find myself now trying to explain myself more often than in the past. And I really had this thought, I remember it vividly. I'm serving God, I'm not drinking, smoking, doing this or that with girls, I'm not partying. And I just thought I was gonna go like this, like I'm just gonna grow. I did Experiencing God 3 times.
Oh my gosh, I did it twice.
It was life-changing. And I didn't realize that glory to glory sometimes goes like this and this.
It
and,
does,
you know, and I guess I call myself sort of an immortal teenager. I mean, I just never would have thought that I would get sick. But I was about to be a counselor at our church youth camp after my freshman year, and I started to have digestive symptoms at camp, which wouldn't be unusual the way they fed us, I guess.
Yes.
But in this case, I had a fever, started losing weight, and I went back home. And I was determined to go back to college, so I thought this is just a minor thing, and my dad gave me some of his remedies, and I continued to lose weight, tried to really keep the severity from my parents because I couldn't imagine not going back to college.
What was your starting weight?
185, and I'm a little over 6 feet tall. And
so you lost 100 pounds?
Well, that was later. So in this first stage, I got down to about 140, and it was already pretty scary looking.
Right.
And I went to school, and I started to experience different symptoms other than digestive, because my initial symptoms were digestive. We ended up going to a medical doctor who tested me for all kinds of things, gave me some antibiotics, sent me back to school. But I really started breaking down. I remember walking to guitar class. You could tell I took a real tough course load. And my hip, I heard this pop, and it almost sounded like it cracked at the same time. And I just started to have severe joint pain, really high fevers. I ended up telling my parents what was going on. And I went home in an emergency situation. I walked into the house. My dad filled a bathtub with ice, put me in there, and this is another vivid memory. He walked out of the room, and I remember him screaming, "Oh God, I don't want my son to die." It was a roller coaster. So we tried every natural remedy you can think of, and ultimately I had to be hospitalized, which I never had gone to the hospital. I was born at home. I never went to the hospital once in my life. This was my first time, and they ran a battery of tests. It was a terrible experience, and I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, and I had never really heard of it, but I knew a very small friend of mine who never grew. He had Crohn's before he hit puberty, and he was 4 foot whatever and really small, and I didn't know much about the disease because it's embarrassing, it's gut related. And I was diagnosed. I was told that with medicine I could live a semi-normal life, but you can't have kids unless you're off this medicine, and you likely need surgery. And I'm sitting there thinking, God said that he has plans for my life, plans to prosper me, not to harm me, to give me a future and a hope. What is this? And I, even though I was in the hospital, I still believed this was more like a cold or a flu. And in my mind, I was still going back to college. But one day turned into a week, turned into a month, and days ran into days. And I described my disease as being trapped in a prison that was my own body, because I was wasting away. I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, but ultimately came diabetes, prostate issues.
Well, your immune system
is
in your
gut.
gut.
Lost my eyesight.
I didn't know that.
I had parasitic, bacterial, fungal, viral infections. And because we went to alternative practitioners, and people won't really appreciate this, but I wrote this in the Maker's Diet because the journey was so much more than the disease. I mean, not only was I deathly ill, I was up all night because I was in the bathroom constantly and I couldn't sleep. But I remember some of the treatments that I undertook were worse than the disease. I met a man who told me that if I put a purple square on a note card under my bed and I wrap my bed in a steel cage, I would get well, because it was all about EMFs
and groundings
at the time.
And all that kind of
and
stuff.
then, of course, all I felt like was I was losing an MMA match really badly. I went to someone who did electrodermal screening, and I'm not trying to be critical of that because many people have benefited, but he told me that I was sensitive to a satellite that orbits the Earth once every 70 years.
Yeah,
and I'm
this
kind of thinking,
stuff drives me nuts.
Could I maybe have gluten or dairy sensitivity? You know, like that's a pretty tough one.
Right.
I consumed liquid herbs from somebody who his father didn't speak English. He was supposedly a scientist. The son translated, and I drank unlabeled liquid herbs, and then later I learned that the father got the recipe while visiting another planet. So, and I know people tend to look at this was part of the 70s.
Yeah, because
you're desperate.
I know
times
every verse of that song.
Desperate measures.
Well, when we come back from the break, I have teased this book like endlessly, but that we've got to establish the journey of, you know, where you get to that place where you're so desperate that you will try anything. I heard you ate dirt. I heard all these stories.
That was the good stuff.
So, okay, we'll get to that in just a minute. After the break, don't go anywhere. Stay close. Hi, everybody. I'm Laura. You're watching The Three. So glad that you're joining us today. And if you are just tuning in, you need to make sure you hop over to our website, the3.tv, and check out the first part of this interview. And stay, come back next week because we're going to have Dr. Jordan Rubin for a second week. We are just getting into the juicy part of the story of your life, your health journey. You're 19 years old. You're about to die. You wind up losing over 100 pounds, just about 100 pounds. And you're on the track for answers. What happened next? And you got to include the part about the dirt.
Yeah,
well, but I know that's at the end. So
I had visited multiple clinics. I went to Germany to a cancer clinic that also had success with Crohn's disease, and that was an absolute disaster. I barely survived, came home with double conjunctivitis, prostatitis, along with full-blown Crohn's disease in a wheelchair. And I remember getting into the Miami airport thinking I can finally hear people speak English. And if you've ever been to Miami, that I had to wait a little bit for that. But it's terrible when you just can thank God for just being alive, for breathing. It's terrible and great at the same time. But I was hospitalized shortly after, again, for the second time. And it was really rough. I went in at my lowest weight, but it wasn't just my weight. I remember when they pulled my pant leg up, it was blue, my nail beds were purple, my iron level, which is called ferritin, was 0. Yeah. There are corpses that have more iron than that in their system. And I could barely stand up. And after that hospitalization, I didn't think I was going to make it. I remember in the hospital, I was so dehydrated that the nurses couldn't find a vein. Now, I'd been to clinics where they gave me an IV with a vein in my pinky toe, which you should never want an IV in your toe for your worst enemy, because the way the blood flows is not
that doesn't make
conducive.
Any sense.
But I was in the hospital and the nurses were coming, phlebotomists were coming, and they were leaving, and one nurse was outside the room crying, saying, "I don't think this young man's going to live." And at that point, I wanted to be with the Lord a lot during this time, but this particular moment I thought I was, because if they can't get hydration in me, I don't think I'm going to make it. And it was almost like I was holding on to a cliff with a pinky. You ever have that realization?
Oh, absolutely.
And I remember thinking to myself, Lord, I've lived a good life. Even though I was 19 only, I'd been on great mission trips and I had great friends. But I remember thinking, but I've never had a chance to truly be in love. I was saving myself, and Lord, I'm missing that, but I get to be with you. And I closed my eyes for what I thought was going to be the last time. This is an amazing situation if you've not been in it, because you imagine closing your eyes, not knowing if you're going to wake up. I did wake up. I was more hydrated. I wasn't well, but I was in the game. I was alive. So I went home from the hospital, and every time I went home, they would switch my medications, and I would hallucinate. It was awful. From hydrocortisone to prednisone. Prednisone's a really rough drug that people use for all kinds of things.
They sure do.
So when I was there, I wasn't better, and in fact, my eyes were so weak that I couldn't read very well. And I had a friend that insisted on coming over because I didn't want anyone to see me. I looked horrible. When I left the house, it was in a wheelchair, and people were sort of repelled from me or repulsed by me because I looked horrible. People would say it like a concentration camp victim. And I didn't want anyone to come over, and I didn't want to talk about my disease. What do I say? I'm in the bathroom 20 times a day. It was awful. So a friend insisted on coming over, and she was reading the Bible to me because I couldn't read anymore. And there was a scripture that became my life verse, and it's Hebrews 11:1. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And I normally have more to the story, but we've got to land the plane here. So I will say this. My step of faith, because it also says without faith it is impossible to please God. Faith without works or action is dead. I got my scrawny butt, no butt, up in my boxer shorts, walked to the closet that was in the hallway, and I'd taken those 7 steps before and fainted because of my lack of nutrients. Like on my face, breaking glasses, blacking out, which happened periodically. But this time I stood there and I said, "Mom." She said, "What?" I said, "I need you to come take my picture." This was the old pictures.
That was the one, okay.
Not the digital. And she said, "Jordan, it breaks my heart to look at you. Can't we wait till you're well?" And I said, "Mom, you need to take this picture because the world's not going to believe what God's about to do in my life."
I love it.
And I cannot tell you how grateful I am that I had that little bit of faith. She took the picture, and I used it. It's everything. I mean, I'm only able to help people because God gave me that little spark of faith. I never smiled during this time. I didn't have joy, didn't have hope really, other than the next doctor. But I had faith, and that faith didn't see me get well the next day, the next month, or the next year. Actually, it was a year. A year later, the 70th medical expert we talked to was I call him an eccentric nutritionist in California. I was living in South Florida at the time, and he said, Jordan, if you will follow a health plan based on the diet, on the Bible, a health plan based on the Bible, proven through history, confirmed by science, you will be working out on the beach in 90 days.
This is free, but it is amazing. Like, just do it God's way.
And I'm thinking to myself, I've read 300 health books. I've been to 69 health practitioners. I read the Bible over and over again. I never learned anything about carrot juice or push-ups. But then I got excited and hope welled up in me. I told my mom I'm going to get well. And all I ever said during my illness was, if God heals me, whatever helps me, I'm going to use to help others. And I'm glad it wasn't Venus flytrap juice. I'm glad it wasn't, I could name a lot. So I figured, wait a minute, God's plan that's a diet and a lifestyle that could be replicated by anyone, and only he could gain the glory. So I went to San Diego, where this man lived. He taught me how to eat and live. Interestingly enough, what he originally told me didn't work, but I had enough knowledge and enough understanding. He led me to a plan that really revolutionized my health. I called it the Maker's Diet. And I have been blessed over the years not only to recover my health. I did work out on the beach 90 days later. I gained most of my weight back in 40 days. I went on a 40-day program, and I remember my parents getting off the plane to visit me in San Diego, and my dad made this comment, which I'll never forget. He came and he said, there's so much of you to hug. I mean, think about that. We take things for granted.
We do.
That was pretty awesome. I gained 29 pounds in 40 days. I looked like a person again. And then another 40 days, and I was on the beach, and the sun, I don't know if you have the after photo with the sunglasses.
So then,
my kids say that was when I was young, and I say, that looks exactly like me other than the sunglasses.
How many copies, Maker's Diet, has it sold?
I think 2 million-ish. I haven't caught up with our new publisher, Destiny. We have a new version coming out too, which I'm excited about. Yeah.
Okay, that is really exciting.
Revised edition.
So I've been sitting here teasing. This is why we're doing 2 shows, because we haven't even gotten to the one that I'm so excited for, the dirt. So
I ate dirt also to get well.
That's the thing, is
probiotics from the soil combined with the diet. We'll leave it at that.
Exactly. And my dad's a farmer. His dad was a farmer. I'm all about, the earth.
And I'm a farmer now too.
Heal your hand. That's right. All right. Well, guys, please come back next week for part 2 of our interview. Jordan, thank you so much. First of all, for everything that you went through. I'm not at all surprised that Jehovah Sneaky made you do it and make it your own, and then you could share this with the world. So come back next week, because we really want to help finish the story and tell you about these amazing books. If you gain 29 pounds in a month, this guy also, we have a book on fasting, the opposite, okay?
Yes,
so we're gonna cover it all next week. Thank you again, Jordan. I'll see you next week on The 3. Bye-bye, everybody.